The scarlet drops against virgin white snow led him to her broken body. And in that moment, beneath the iron sky of December 1882, Jackson Nolan knew his solitary life was about to change forever. The trail started just beyond the canyon pass, where the wind had carved drifts into frozen waves against the rock face. Jackson had been tracking elk when he noticed the disturbance in the snow, the way it was scattered and churned as if something violent had happened. Then he saw the blood, bright and terrible against the pristine whiteness, leading away from what looked like wagon tracks and the hoof prints of multiple horses. His gelding, a sturdy bay named Rust, snorted nervously as Jackson dismounted. The tracks told a story he had seen too many times in his 32 years living in the territories between Nevada and California. Bandits had stopped a wagon here, probably yesterday, judging by how the snow had begun to fill in some of the deeper impressions. There had been a struggle. Whoever had been traveling this remote pass had fought back, and the blood suggested they had lost. Jackson followed the crimson trail with a heavy heart. Most men would have turned back, assuming whoever had bled this much was already dead and not worth the trouble. But something pulled him forward, some instinct he could not name. The trail led him around a massive boulder and down a slight embankment where the wind had piled snow nearly 4 feet high in places. That was where he found her. She was half buried in a snowbank, her dark hair spread around her like a halo against the white. Blood had soaked through her dress on the left side, turning the blue fabric nearly black. Her face was pale as death, her lips tinged with blue. Jackson rushed forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pulled off his glove and pressed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. There, faint and thready, but there. "Hold on," he whispered, though she could not hear him. "Just hold on." He worked quickly, knowing that hypothermia might kill her before blood loss did. Jackson shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her small frame, then carefully lifted her from the snowbank. She was light in his arms, too light, and up close he could see she was young, maybe 25 at most. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw even in unconsciousness. Getting her onto Rust took some maneuvering, but Jackson had handled worse situations. He mounted behind her, holding her against his chest to share his warmth as he turned the gelding south. His cabin was 3 miles away, back down the mountain pass and into the shelter of the pine forest that covered the lower slopes. It would be dark soon, and the temperature would drop even further. The ride seemed to take forever. Jackson kept one arm wrapped around the woman, holding her upright, while his other hand managed the reins. He talked to her constantly, nonsense mostly, anything to keep himself focused on getting her to safety rather than thinking about how still she was, how shallow her breathing. "My name is Jackson," he said against the howling wind. "Jackson Nolan. Got a cabin not far from here. It is not much, but it is warm and dry. You are going to be fine. You hear me? You are going to be just fine." She did not respond, did not even stir, and Jackson urged Rust faster. By the time they reached his cabin, full darkness had fallen and Jackson's arms ached from holding her. He half fell from the saddle, then carefully pulled her down and carried her inside. The cabin was cold, the fire having died hours ago, but Jackson had dry wood stacked by the hearth. He laid her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and went to work building up the fire. Once flames were crackling and heat began to fill the small space, Jackson turned his attention back to the woman. He lit 2 lanterns, setting them on the table near the bed so he could see properly. Then he took a deep breath and began to assess her injuries. Her dress was torn and bloody, and when he carefully peeled back the fabric, he found a bullet wound in her side just above her hip. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good. It meant nothing was lodged inside. But she had lost a lot of blood, and the wound needed to be cleaned and stitched. Jackson had some experience with this. Living alone in the wilderness meant being your own doctor most of the time. He had stitched himself up more than once after tangles with wildlife or accidents with his tools. He gathered his supplies: clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting, a needle and thread, and set to work. First, he had to get her out of the wet, bloody clothes. Jackson tried to be respectful, averting his eyes as much as possible while still being able to work. He cut away her dress and her undergarments on the left side, leaving her covered everywhere else. The wound was angry and red, the edges ragged. He cleaned it carefully with whiskey, wishing she was awake so he could give her something to bite down on. This would hurt. But she remained unconscious, which maybe was a blessing. Jackson threaded his needle and began to stitch. His hands were steady, his stitches neat and even. He had learned long ago that slow and careful was better than fast and sloppy. When he finished the front, he carefully turned her and stitched the exit wound on her back. Once both wounds were closed and bandaged, Jackson covered her with every blanket he owned. She was still too cold, her skin like ice beneath his fingers. He knew what he had to do, even though it made him uncomfortable. Body heat was the fastest way to warm someone suffering from hypothermia. Jackson stripped down to his union suit and climbed into bed beside her, pulling her against him and wrapping his arms around her. She was so small, so fragile feeling. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, could feel each shallow breath she took. He held her close and willed his warmth into her, praying she would live through the night. Hours passed. Jackson dozed fitfully, waking every few minutes to check on her. Gradually, her skin grew warmer. Her breathing deepened. As dawn light began to creep through the cabin's single window, her eyelids fluttered. Jackson felt her stiffen in his arms, felt the moment consciousness returned. He loosened his hold immediately, giving her space. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe. You are hurt, but you are safe." She turned her head, and Jackson found himself staring into the most striking eyes he had ever seen. They were green, the color of new pine needles, and even clouded with pain and confusion, they were beautiful. "Who?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Jackson Nolan. I found you in the snow. You had been shot." Her eyes widened, and her hand moved to her side, finding the bandages. "The bandits," she breathed. "They took everything. The wagon, the horses, all my belongings. They shot me and left me to die." "Well, you did not die," Jackson said firmly, "and you are not going to, but you need to rest. You lost a lot of blood." She stared at him for a long moment, and Jackson became acutely aware that he was in bed with a stranger, that she was barely dressed and he was in his union suit. Color crept into her pale cheeks. "I should get up," Jackson said, carefully extricating himself from the blankets. "I will make some broth. You need to eat." He moved to the fireplace, stoking the flames and hanging his pot over the fire. He had some dried venison and vegetables, enough to make a decent broth. As he worked, he was conscious of her watching him. "What is your name?" he asked, not turning around. "Olivia," she said after a moment. "Olivia Jensen." "Well, Miss Jensen, can you tell me what you were doing out in that pass all alone?" There was a long silence. When Jackson glanced back at her, he saw tears sliding down her cheeks. "I was traveling from Sacramento to meet my brother in Nevada," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He is the only family I have left. Our parents died last year and Henry sent for me. I hired a guide and a wagon in Sacramento, but when we reached the pass, men on horses surrounded us. They shot my guide first. He did not even have a chance to draw his weapon. Then they demanded I give them everything." She paused, wiping at her tears with a shaking hand. I refused. My mother's jewelry was in my trunk, the only things I had left of her. When I would not hand it over, one of them shot me. I fell from the wagon and they just took everything and left. I crawled to the snowbank, thinking I could hide until they were gone, but I must have passed out. Jackson felt anger burn in his chest. He had seen too much cruelty in his years in the West, too much senseless violence. How many were there? 4, Olivia said. 4 men. One had a scar across his face running from his forehead down to his chin. Another wore a black hat with silver conchos on the band. Jackson nodded slowly. He had heard of men matching that description. The Kerrigan gang, probably. They had been terrorizing travelers through the mountain passes for months. The law had been after them, but they were smart, always moving, never staying in one place long enough to get caught. "Your brother," Jackson said, changing the subject. "Does he know you were coming?" "Yes. I sent a telegram before I left Sacramento. He will be expecting me in Carson City in 3 days." She tried to sit up, then gasped in pain and fell back against the pillows. "I have to get there. Henry will be worried." "You are not going anywhere for a while," Jackson said firmly. "That wound needs time to heal. If you try to ride now, you will tear the stitches and could bleed to death. Your brother will have to wait." Olivia looked like she wanted to argue, but another wave of pain crossed her face and she closed her eyes. "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden." The words came out more forcefully than Jackson intended. He softened his tone. "You are hurt. Let me help you. When you are strong enough, I will take you to your brother myself." She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, and Jackson felt something shift in his chest. There was something about this woman, something beyond her beauty. Strength, maybe. Determination. She had been shot and left to die, but there was no give up in those green eyes. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Jackson stirred the broth, considering. "Because someone has to," he finally said. "There is too much taking in this world, too much hurting. Someone has to give something back." Over the following days, a careful routine developed. Jackson slept on the floor by the fire, giving Olivia the bed. He cooked simple meals and helped her eat when she was too weak to manage on her own. He changed her bandages twice a day, keeping the wound clean and watching for signs of infection. Olivia was a stoic patient, rarely complaining even though he knew she was in considerable pain. They talked to pass the time. Olivia told him about her life in Sacramento, how she had worked as a seamstress after her parents died, saving every penny to buy supplies for her journey to Nevada. She spoke about her brother with obvious affection, how Henry had gone to Carson City to work in the silver mines and had finally saved enough to send for her. "He always looked after me," she said one evening as Jackson was stirring stew over the fire. "After Papa died, Henry worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He was only 19, but he never complained. When Mama got sick, he paid for the doctors, even though we all knew there was nothing they could do. And when she passed, he made sure I had what I needed until he could establish himself in Nevada." "He sounds like a good man," Jackson said. "The best. What about you? Do you have family?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "Had a brother once, Caleb. He died at Shiloh. The war." Olivia's voice was soft with understanding. "Yes. I was there too, but I made it out. Caleb did not. After the war, I could not go back home, too many memories. So I drifted west, worked as a ranch hand for a while, did some prospecting. Eventually ended up here. Built this cabin 5 years ago. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is a good cabin," Olivia said. "Warm and solid. You built something that matters." Jackson glanced at her, surprised. Most people would have called his life lonely, empty even, but Olivia seemed to understand the value in what he had created. A week passed, then two. Olivia grew stronger each day. She could sit up without gasping in pain, could walk short distances around the cabin. The color returned to her cheeks, and she started helping with small tasks, insisting she needed to be useful. "I cannot just lie in bed all day," she said when Jackson protested. "Let me help, please." So he taught her how he liked his coffee made, and she took over that task. She mended a tear in his shirt, her seamstress skills evident in the tiny, perfect stitches. She even attempted to cook dinner one evening, though the results were mixed at best. "I am sorry," she said, staring at the burnt venison with dismay. "I am not much of a cook." Jackson bit into the charred meat and chewed stoically. "It is fine. You are lying. It is terrible." He could not help but laugh. "All right, it is pretty bad, but the effort counts for something." Olivia laughed too, and Jackson realized it was the first time he had heard the sound. It was like music, bright and genuine, and he found himself wanting to hear it again. As the days turned into weeks, Jackson began to dread the moment when Olivia would be well enough to leave. He had grown accustomed to her presence, to having someone to talk to in the evenings, to hearing her soft breathing as she slept across the room. The cabin, which had always felt sufficient before, now seemed like it would be unbearably empty without her. He tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the present moment. But he caught himself watching her sometimes, the way the firelight played across her face, the graceful movements of her hands as she worked on her mending. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She was kind and strong and determined. She made him laugh. She listened when he talked about his life, his dreams for the future. She made him feel less alone, and that terrified him. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after he had found her, Olivia was standing by the window looking out at the snow-covered landscape. Jackson was cleaning his rifle at the table, trying not to stare at her silhouette against the fading light. "I should be able to travel soon," she said quietly. "The wound has healed well. I barely feel any pain anymore." Jackson's hand stilled on the rifle. "Yes. Another week, maybe, and you should be strong enough for the journey. You have been so kind to me, Jackson. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything." She turned to face him. "I owe you my life." Their eyes met, and Jackson felt that shift in his chest again, stronger this time. He wanted to say something, wanted to tell her that she had given him something too, that these weeks had been the best he could remember in years. But the words stuck in his throat. Olivia was the one who broke the silence. "Will you really take me to Carson City?" I said I would. "It is a long journey, 5 or 6 days at least. I know the way, and I do not mind the ride." She studied him for a long moment, and something flickered in her green eyes. "I will miss this place. I will miss you." Jackson's heart hammered against his ribs. "You are welcome to come back, any time." "Would you want that? Would you want me to come back?" The question hung in the air between them. Jackson slowly set down his rifle and stood. He crossed the small cabin until he was standing in front of her. "Yes," he said simply. "I would want that very much." Olivia's breath caught. She reached up and placed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. "I feel safe with you." "I have not felt safe in so long, not since my parents died. But here with you, I feel like nothing bad can touch me." Jackson covered her hand with his own. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." "What?" "These past weeks, having you here, it has meant more to me than I can say. I have been alone for so long, and I thought I preferred it that way. But now I cannot imagine going back to that. I cannot imagine this cabin without you in it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Jackson, I feel the same way, but I have to go to Henry. He is expecting me, and he is my only family. I cannot just abandon him. I know. I would never ask you to. But maybe after you see your brother, after you explain everything, maybe you could think about coming back. Not just to visit, to stay." "Stay," she whispered. "With me. As my wife, if you would have me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. We have only known each other 3 weeks. I know, and I know it is fast, maybe too fast, but I also know what I feel, and I think you feel it too. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, and Jackson's heart sank. He had moved too quickly, scared her off. But then she smiled, bright and beautiful through her tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I feel it too, and yes, I will think about it. I promise. Jackson felt relief wash over him. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her still healing wound, and held her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin. I will wait, he said against her hair. However long it takes, I will wait. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as darkness fell outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. Jackson had never been good with words, had never been the romantic type. But standing there with Olivia, feeling her heart beat against his chest, he felt something he had not felt since before the war. He felt hope. The following week passed in a blur. Olivia continued to regain her strength, and Jackson began preparing for their journey to Carson City. He packed supplies, checked his weapons, made sure Rust and his pack mule were ready for the long ride. On the morning of their departure, Jackson woke before dawn. He lay on his bedroll by the fire and watched Olivia sleep, memorizing the sight of her. In a week, they would reach Carson City. She would reunite with her brother, and then Jackson would ride back here alone, with nothing but the hope that she would choose to return to him. He must have made some noise because Olivia's eyes opened. She looked at him across the cabin and smiled. Good morning, morning. How do you feel? Good, strong, ready to ride. They broke camp quickly, eating a simple breakfast of coffee and hardtack before loading up the animals. Jackson helped Olivia into the saddle, making sure she was comfortable. He had fashioned a sort of cushion for her to sit on, extra padding to protect her healing wound from the rigors of riding. Thank you, she said, settling into place. For everything. Jackson just nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He mounted Rust and took up the lead rope for the pack mule. Then they set off, leaving the cabin behind as they headed northeast toward Nevada. The journey was slow but peaceful. They traveled through pine forests and across high meadows, following trails Jackson knew well. The weather held, cold but clear, and they made good progress each day. At night, they camped under the stars, Jackson always making sure Olivia was comfortable before he allowed himself to rest. They talked as they rode, conversations that ranged from light and teasing to deep and meaningful. Jackson learned about Olivia's dreams of opening her own dress shop someday, about how she loved to read but rarely had money for books. Olivia learned about Jackson's time as a soldier, about the friends he had lost and the scars he carried, both visible and invisible. You ever think about leaving the mountains? She asked one afternoon as they rode through a canyon painted with winter sunlight. Sometimes. But I do not know where I would go. The city does not appeal to me and I am too old to start over completely. You are not old. How old are you? 32. That is not old at all. You have your whole life ahead of you. Jackson glanced at her. What about you? What do you want for your life? Olivia was quiet for a moment. I want stability, safety, a home that no one can take from me. Maybe children someday if I am lucky enough to find someone who wants that too. Someone like your brother. No, she said softly. Someone like you. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. They rode like that for a while, hands clasped, neither of them speaking. On the 4th day, they passed through a small mining town called Silver Springs. Jackson suggested they stop to rest the horses and resupply. They tied their animals outside the general store and went inside, grateful to be out of the cold wind. The store was busy with miners and their families buying supplies. Jackson was selecting ammunition when he heard Olivia gasp. He turned to find her staring at a woman across the store, her face pale. "What is wrong?" he asked, moving to her side. "That woman. She is wearing my mother's brooch." Jackson followed her gaze. The woman in question was middle-aged and well-dressed, with a green brooch pinned to her collar. It was distinctive, shaped like a flower with what looked like emeralds forming the petals. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely. My father commissioned it for their anniversary. There is not another like it." Jackson felt his jaw tighten. "Then we need to find out how she got it." They approached the woman carefully. Jackson removed his hat and spoke politely. "Excuse me, madam. My friend here could not help but notice your brooch. It is very beautiful. May I ask where you got it?" The woman touched the brooch self-consciously. "Oh, this. My husband bought it for me last week. He said a peddler came through selling jewelry. Why do you ask?" "That brooch was stolen from me," Olivia said, her voice shaking but firm. "Bandits took it when they shot me and left me to die." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness, I had no idea. My husband bought it in good faith. He would never purchase stolen goods knowingly." "We believe you," Jackson said. "But we need to find this peddler. Do you know where he went?" "He was heading toward Virginia City, last I heard. Tall man, thin, with a mustache. He was traveling with 2 others." Jackson and Olivia exchanged glances. "How long ago?" "4 days, maybe 5. "Thank you," Jackson said. "You have been very helpful." Outside the store, Olivia grabbed his arm. "Jackson, we have to go after them. If they have my mother's jewelry, they must be connected to the bandits who attacked me. Or they bought the goods from the bandits," Jackson said. "Either way, you are right. We need to find them. But Virginia City is 3 days from here, and it is not on the way to Carson City." "I do not care. I have to get my mother's things back. They are all I have left of her." Jackson saw the determination in her eyes and knew there was no talking her out of it. "All right. We go to Virginia City, but if we find these men, we do this smart. No heroics. We find the law and let them handle it." "Agreed." They purchased supplies and left Silver Springs within the hour, now heading northwest toward Virginia City. The detour would add at least a week to their journey, but Jackson did not complain. He understood what those belongings meant to Olivia. Besides, if the men they were chasing really were connected to the bandits who had nearly killed her, they deserved to face justice. The ride to Virginia City took them through rougher country. The trails were less maintained, and they had to navigate around rockslides and fallen trees. One night, they camped in a box canyon with high walls that provided shelter from the wind. Jackson built a larger fire than usual, sensing Olivia needed the extra warmth and comfort. She sat close to the flames, staring into the coals. What if we do not find them? What if they have already moved on? Then we keep looking, or we accept that some things cannot be recovered. I cannot accept that. Those pieces, the brooch, my mother's ring, her locket, they are all I have to remember her by. When I wear them, I feel like she is still with me somehow. Jackson moved to sit beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him. "Tell me about her, your mother." Olivia smiled, though her eyes were distant with memory. "She was kind, patient. She taught me to sew, to read, to see beauty in small things. Even when we did not have much money, she always made our home feel warm and welcoming. She would sing while she worked, old songs her mother taught her, and she loved my father with her whole heart. Even when he was sick at the end, she never left his side. She sounds like a wonderful woman." "She was. I want to be like her someday, strong and loving and unafraid." "You already are," Jackson said. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Olivia looked up at him, and in the firelight her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for saying that. And thank you for coming with me on this detour. You could have just taken me to Carson City and been done with it. I could have, but I do not want to be done with it. With you." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I have been thinking about what you asked me, about coming back to the cabin, about being your wife." Jackson's heart began to pound. And I think I have known my answer since the day you asked. I just needed time to admit it to myself." "What is your answer?" Olivia leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Jackson Nolan. I will come back to that cabin with you and make it our home. I will spend my life with you if you will have me." Jackson felt something break open in his chest, something warm and bright that he had thought long dead. He pulled her close and kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. "I love you," he said, the words feeling strange and wonderful on his tongue. "I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Olivia." "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have loved you since you pulled me out of that snowbank." They held each other in the firelight, making plans and promises for their future together. They would find Olivia's mother's jewelry, then go to Carson City so she could see her brother. Henry would want to meet Jackson, would want to make sure his sister was in good hands. Then they would return to the cabin together as husband and wife. Maybe in the spring they would expand the cabin, add another room. They could talk about children, about building a real life together. For the first time in years, Jackson allowed himself to dream beyond the next day, the next season. With Olivia beside him, the future looked bright and full of possibility. They reached Virginia City 3 days later, arriving in the bustling mining town just after noon. The streets were crowded with miners, merchants, and all manner of people drawn by the promise of silver wealth. Jackson and Olivia made their way to the sheriff's office, a sturdy brick building near the center of town. Sheriff Thomas Hartley was a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Olivia told her story, how she had been attacked by bandits and left for dead, how Jackson had found her and saved her life. She described the stolen jewelry and the peddlers who seemed to be selling the stolen goods. "I have heard about those bandits," Hartley said when she finished. "The Kerrigan gang. They have been hitting travelers up and down the California-Nevada border for months. We almost caught them last fall, but they slipped away. As for these peddlers, I have not seen anyone matching that description, but I will put the word out. If they are in Virginia City, we will find them." "Thank you, Sheriff," Jackson said. "We appreciate your help." "Where are you folks staying?" "We just arrived." "I suppose we need to find lodging." Hartley nodded. "Try the Washoe Hotel on C Street. Clean rooms, decent food. Tell Martha at the desk that I sent you. She will take care of you." They followed the sheriff's advice and secured a room at the Washoe Hotel. It was a far cry from Jackson's rustic cabin, with real beds and wallpapered walls and a dining room that served hot meals 3 times a day. Olivia seemed overwhelmed by it all, but Jackson could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The journey had taken its toll and she needed proper rest. That night, after a dinner of roast beef and potatoes, they retired to their room. Jackson had secured 2 rooms initially, wanting to be proper, but Olivia had taken his hand and quietly asked if they could share. They were to be married, after all, and she felt safer with him near. So Jackson lay in one bed while Olivia took the other, the two of them separated by a few feet of floor but connected by something far stronger. They talked in the darkness, their voices soft, making plans for their wedding. They decided they would marry in Carson City, with Olivia's brother present. Then they would honeymoon by taking the long route back to the cabin, stopping at beautiful spots Jackson knew along the way. "I cannot wait," Olivia said sleepily. "I cannot wait to start our life together." "Neither can I," Jackson replied. "Sleep now. Tomorrow we find those peddlers and get your mother's things back." But finding the peddlers proved more difficult than expected. They spent 2 days asking around Virginia City, following false leads and dead ends. No one seemed to have seen the men recently, and Jackson began to worry they had already moved on to another town. On the 3rd day, their luck changed. They were eating breakfast in the hotel dining room when a young boy approached their table. "Are you the folks looking for the peddlers?" he asked breathlessly. Jackson sat up straight. "We are. Have you seen them?" "Yes, sir. They are set up in the market square selling all kinds of things. My ma sent me to fetch you." Jackson tossed some coins on the table and grabbed his hat. "Show us." The boy led them through the crowded streets to the market square, a large open area where vendors sold everything from fresh produce to mining equipment. Near the far corner, 3 men had set up a makeshift stall displaying jewelry, pocket watches, and other valuable items. Olivia grabbed Jackson's arm. "That is them. I can see my mother's locket from here." "Easy," Jackson said. "Let me handle this." They approached the stall slowly. The peddlers were exactly as described, tall and thin with a mustache, and his 2 companions looked like rough characters. As they got closer, Jackson studied the jewelry on display. There were several pieces that looked expensive, the kind of things that would be in a wealthy woman's collection. "Afternoon," Jackson said pleasantly. "You have some nice items here." The lead peddler smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "Best prices in Virginia City, friend. Looking for something special for your lady, maybe. Where do you get your stock?" "Here and there. We buy from folks who need quick cash, estate sales, that sort of thing." Olivia stepped forward, pointing to the locket. "That locket, may I see it?" The peddler hesitated, then picked up the locket and handed it to her. Olivia opened it with trembling fingers, and Jackson saw her eyes fill with tears. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of a man and one of a woman. Her parents, he realized. "This is mine," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "It was stolen from me by bandits who shot me and left me to die, along with this brooch and this ring and several other pieces I see here." The peddler's smile vanished. "Now hold on. I bought these fair and square." "From bandits," Jackson said coldly. "From the Kerrigan gang, unless I miss my guess." The other 2 peddlers had gone still, their hands moving toward their weapons. Jackson's hand moved to his own pistol, and suddenly the market square felt very tense. "I think we all need to take a trip to the sheriff's office," Jackson said. "Nice and easy. No need for anyone to get hurt." "I am not going anywhere," the lead peddler snarled. He moved to grab the jewelry to pack it up and flee, but Olivia was faster. She snatched up as many pieces as she could, clutching them to her chest. "These are mine," she cried. One of the other peddlers lunged for her. Jackson moved on pure instinct, putting himself between the man and Olivia. His fist connected with the peddler's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Then chaos erupted. The lead peddler drew a knife while the 3rd man went for his gun. Jackson shoved Olivia behind him and drew his own weapon, but before he could fire, Sheriff Hartley and 2 deputies appeared, weapons drawn. "Nobody move," Hartley barked. "You 3, hands where I can see them. Now." The peddlers froze. Slowly, reluctantly, they raised their hands. The deputies moved in, disarming them and slapping irons on their wrists. Hartley looked at Jackson and Olivia. "You 2 all right?" "We are fine," Jackson said. "But I think you will want to hear what these men have to say about the Kerrigan gang." It took several hours to sort everything out at the sheriff's office. The peddlers claimed they had bought the jewelry from men they met in a saloon, men who fit the description of the Kerrigan gang. Under pressure from Hartley, They finally admitted they had suspected the goods were stolen but had not cared. One of them even let slip a meeting location, a canyon hideout 2 days' ride from Virginia City. "I will wire the U.S. Marshal," Hartley said. "With this information, we can finally run those bandits to ground. Miss Jensen, you have done a service to every traveler in the territory." Olivia clutched her mother's jewelry, the pieces that had been recovered. Not everything was there. Some items had already been sold and were gone forever, but she had the locket, the brooch, and her mother's wedding ring. "The most important pieces. Thank you, Sheriff," she said, "for everything. Thank you for not giving up." Most folks would have just accepted the loss and moved on. Your determination might bring some dangerous men to justice. That evening, back at the hotel, Olivia carefully cleaned each piece of jewelry, polishing away the tarnish and grime. Jackson watched her work, seeing the love and care she put into each item. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said. "The way you fought to get these back." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes bright. "I think she would be proud of more than that. I think she would be happy I found you." Jackson crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. He took her hands in his. "I want to give you something. I know it is not much, but I want you to have it." He pulled a small object from his pocket, a silver ring with a single small turquoise stone. "It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman I would marry. I want you to have it if you will accept it." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "Jackson, it is beautiful. Of course I will accept it." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Olivia held up her hand, admiring how the turquoise caught the lamplight. "We are really doing this," she said wonderingly. "We are really going to be married. If you will still have me. Always, I will always have you." They left Virginia City 2 days later, heading northeast toward Carson City. The journey took 5 days, and with each mile, Olivia grew more nervous about seeing her brother. She had not seen Henry in over a year, and she had so much to tell him. "What if he does not like me?" Jackson asked as they rode into the outskirts of Carson City. "He will love you," Olivia assured him. "How could he not?" They found Henry Jensen working at the assay office, a small building near the center of town. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with the same green eyes as his sister. When Olivia walked through the door, his face transformed with joy. "Livy." He rushed forward and swept her into a hug, lifting her off her feet. "Thank God. When you did not arrive weeks ago, I thought something terrible had happened." "Something did happen," Olivia said, pulling back to look at her brother. "But I am all right now. Henry, I have so much to tell you." They spent the afternoon in Henry's small house on the edge of town, Olivia recounting everything that had happened. Henry's face went pale when she described being shot by the bandits, and his hands clenched into fists when she told him about being left to die. But when she spoke about Jackson finding her, saving her life, nursing her back to health, Henry's expression softened. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," he said, standing to shake Jackson's hand. "You gave me back my sister." "No debt," Jackson said firmly. "I did what anyone should have done." "But most would not have," Henry replied. "You are a good man, Jackson Nolan, I can see it." Then Olivia took a deep breath and told her brother about the engagement. Henry was quiet for a long moment, studying Jackson with those sharp green eyes. Jackson met his gaze steadily, letting the other man see his intentions, his feelings for Olivia written plain on his face. Finally, Henry smiled. "Well, I cannot say I expected this when I sent for you, Livy, but I can see you are happy, truly happy. And after everything our family has been through, that is all I want for you. You have my blessing." Olivia threw her arms around her brother, crying and laughing at the same time. Jackson felt relief wash over him. Henry's approval mattered, not just for Olivia's sake, but because family was important. He understood that better than most. They spent a week in Carson City, making arrangements for the wedding. It was a simple ceremony, held in the small church on Sunday morning with Henry and a few of his friends as witnesses. Olivia wore a new dress that she and Jackson had purchased at the general store, a pretty blue calico that brought out her eyes. Jackson wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, his boots polished until they shone. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about two people becoming one before God. When it came time to exchange vows, Jackson's voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and protect you for all the days of my life. I promise to work hard to give you the life you deserve, to make you laugh when times are hard, and to stand by your side no matter what comes. You saved me, Olivia, as surely as I saved you. You brought light back into my life, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that gift." Olivia's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you, support you, and build a home with you. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face the challenges of life with courage because I will face them with you. You gave me a second chance at life, Jackson, and I want to spend that life making you as happy as you have made me." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed Olivia as if they were the only two people in the world. The small congregation cheered, and Henry clapped Jackson on the back, welcoming him officially into the family. That night, there was a modest celebration at the local saloon. Henry had arranged it, insisting his sister deserved a proper wedding party. There was music and dancing, food and drinks, and for a few hours, Jackson allowed himself to simply be happy. He danced with his wife, the words still feeling new and wonderful in his mind, and he laughed with Henry and the others who had come to celebrate. But as much as he enjoyed the party, Jackson found himself anxious to leave, to begin the journey back to the cabin with Olivia. He wanted to start their real life together, away from the crowds and noise, in the quiet peace of the mountains. They left Carson City 2 days later, after a tearful goodbye between Olivia and Henry. Her brother made her promise to write often, and to visit when the weather allowed. Jackson shook Henry's hand and promised to take care of his sister, a promise he intended to keep until his dying day. The ride back to the cabin took nearly 2 weeks, but Jackson made sure to take his time, to show Olivia beautiful spots along the way. They stopped at a crystal-clear lake surrounded by aspens, their white trunks gleaming in the winter sun. They camped in a meadow where elk grazed in the early morning light. They even found a hot spring, a hidden gem that Jackson had stumbled upon years ago, and they soaked in the warm water beneath the stars. Each night, they made love in their shared bedroll, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Olivia was shy at first, but Jackson was patient and gentle, and soon she grew bold, initiating their intimacy with a passion that took his breath away. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered one night, lying in his arms. "I never knew I could feel so complete." "Neither did I," Jackson replied honestly. "You are everything I never knew I needed." When they finally reached the cabin in late February, the snow was beginning to melt, revealing patches of brown earth and the first hints of green. Jackson helped Olivia down from her horse and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Nolan," he said, setting her down gently. Olivia looked around the cabin with shining eyes. "It looks different somehow. Better." "That is because you are here. You make everything better." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Olivia took over the cooking, improving dramatically with practice, and she organized the cabin with a woman's touch. She hung curtains she had sewn herself, arranged wildflowers in jars when the spring blooms appeared, and created a cozy, welcoming space. Jackson hunted and trapped, providing meat and furs to sell in the nearby settlement. He began work on expanding the cabin, adding a second room as he had promised. Olivia helped when she could, handing him tools and holding boards steady as he hammered. They talked about the future constantly. Jackson wanted to buy some cattle, maybe start a small ranch. Olivia wanted to plant a vegetable garden and maybe raise chickens. They both wanted children, a family to fill the cabin with noise and laughter. As spring turned to summer, Olivia's belly began to swell with their first child. Jackson was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He became even more protective, insisting she rest more, that she not overexert herself. Olivia tolerated his hovering with good humor, understanding that it came from a place of love. One evening in late August, Olivia went into labor. Jackson rode like the devil to fetch the midwife from the settlement, an older woman named Mrs. Callahan, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. She took one look at Olivia and sent Jackson outside, telling him he would just be in the way. Jackson paced outside the cabin for hours, listening to Olivia's cries and praying to a God he had not spoken to in years. Please, he begged silently, please let them both be all right. I cannot lose her, not now. Not ever. As dawn broke over the mountains, Jackson heard a new sound. A baby's cry, strong and insistent. He rushed to the door, but Mrs. Callahan blocked his way. Give us a minute, she said with a smile. Let me get them cleaned up. Those were the longest minutes of Jackson's life. Finally, Mrs. Callahan opened the door and beckoned him inside. Olivia was propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. Come meet your son, she said softly. Jackson approached slowly, almost afraid to believe it. Olivia pulled back the blanket, revealing a tiny red face, eyes squeezed shut, one small fist waving in the air. Jackson felt his throat tighten with emotion. A son, he whispered. We have a son. What should we name him? Olivia asked. Jackson thought about his brother, about the family he had lost. Caleb, after my brother. If that is all right with you, Caleb Nolan, it is perfect. Jackson carefully took his son, cradling the small, warm weight against his chest. Caleb made a small noise and settled, as if he already knew he was safe. Jackson looked at Olivia, his wife, the mother of his child, and felt his heart overflow with love. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for this, for everything. Thank you, Olivia replied. For finding me, for saving me, for giving me this beautiful life. The years that followed were the happiest of Jackson's life. Caleb grew into a strong, curious boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's determination. 2 years after Caleb's birth, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, a delicate girl with golden curls and a stubborn streak a mile wide. The cabin had grown too, with Jackson adding rooms as the family expanded. He built a proper barn for their growing herd of cattle and a chicken coop for Olivia's hens. The vegetable garden flourished, providing fresh produce through the summer and canned goods for the winter. Henry visited often, and eventually he met a woman of his own, a school teacher named Sarah. They married and settled in Carson City, giving Caleb and Catherine cousins to play with during visits. Jackson and Olivia's love deepened with each passing year. They had their struggles, of course. There were harsh winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and worry kept them up at night. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger through adversity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson took Olivia back to the spot where he had found her, all those years ago in the Snowbank. It was summer now, and the canyon pass was green and alive with wildflowers. I think about that day sometimes, Olivia said, standing at the spot where she had nearly died. "How different my life would be if you had not come along. I would have died here, alone and forgotten." "But I did come along," Jackson said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And you did not die. You lived, and you gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. We gave each other that life." They stood there for a long time, looking out over the valley below, remembering the journey that had brought them together. Then they rode back to the cabin, to their children and their home, to the life they had built together from blood and snow and desperate hope. 20 years after the day Jackson found Olivia bleeding in the snow, they sat on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Their children were grown now. Caleb was working a ranch 3 counties over, and Catherine had married a farmer and given Jackson and Olivia their first grandchild. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked, her hand clasped in Jackson's. "Giving up your solitary life for all this chaos?" Jackson looked at his wife, at the silver threading through her dark hair, at the laugh lines around her eyes and mouth. She was still beautiful to him, more beautiful even than the day he had first seen her. "Not for a single second," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we built, our children, our grandchildren, all of it, I would not change a moment. Not even the part where I burned the venison," Jackson laughed. "Not even that. Well, maybe that part." Olivia swatted his arm playfully, and they sat together as darkness fell, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in rhythm. The trail of blood in the snow had led Jackson to his greatest treasure. The bandits who had tried to steal Olivia's life had instead given her a new one, better than anything she could have imagined. Sometimes, Jackson thought, the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes, what feels like an ending is really just the beginning. And sometimes, just sometimes, 2 broken people find each other in the wilderness and create something whole and beautiful and true. Their love story, born from violence and desperation, had blossomed into something lasting and profound. And as they sat together on that porch, surrounded by the mountains and the gathering stars, both Jackson and Olivia knew that they had found what everyone searches for. A love worth fighting for, a partnership built to last, and a home in each other's hearts that nothing could ever take away. The Kerrigan gang was eventually caught, thanks to the information from the peddlers. They faced justice for their crimes, including the attack on Olivia. She testified at their trial, standing strong and brave as she recounted what they had done. When the verdict came back guilty, Jackson held her as she cried tears of relief and closure. Through it all, their family remained the center of their world. They taught their children about hard work and kindness, about standing up for what was right and protecting those who could not protect themselves. They passed down the stories of their courtship, how a trail of blood in the snow had led to a lifetime of love. Grandchildren came, then great-grandchildren. The cabin became a gathering place for holidays and celebrations, always filled with laughter and love. Jackson built additions as needed, creating a sprawling homestead that housed 3 generations of Nolans. On the 50th anniversary of the day they met, Jackson led Olivia out into the snow. He had saddled Rust's great-grandson, and they rode together up to the canyon pass, just as they had done so many times over the years. 50 years, Olivia said wonderingly. "Can you believe it has been 50 years? Jackson, now 82 but still strong and vital, pulled her close. "Best 50 years of my life." They stood in the spot where it all began, where blood had stained the snow and a desperate man had followed his instincts to save a dying woman. The place where 2 lives had collided and merged, creating something neither could have achieved alone. "I love you, Jackson Nolan," Olivia said, just as she had said countless times over their 5 decades together. Today, tomorrow, and always. And I love you, Olivia Nolan, Jackson replied. Until my last breath and beyond. They rode back to the cabin together, to their family and their legacy, two souls so intertwined that neither could imagine existing without the other. The trail of blood that had once marked Olivia's path to death had instead become the road to the greatest love story either had ever known. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the violence that had brought them together, not the hardships they had endured, but the love they had built and nurtured and cherished through every season of their lives. A love that started with one man's decision to follow a trail of blood and a woman's determination to survive. A love that grew into a family, a legacy, and a testament to the power of two people who refused to give up on each other or on the life they dreamed of creating together. Years later, long after Jackson and Olivia had passed peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, their story lived on. Their descendants gathered at the old homestead every year, telling the tale of how their family began with a cowboy who found a trail of blood in the snow, and how that act of compassion had created a dynasty of love that would last for generations. The cabin still stood, maintained by the family as a monument to Jackson and Olivia's love. Inside, carefully preserved, were the pieces of jewelry that Olivia had fought so hard to reclaim, her mother's brooch and locket and ring. Beside them, in a place of honor, sat the silver ring with the turquoise stone that Jackson had given her, the symbol of their commitment and their unbreakable bond. And sometimes, on quiet winter evenings when the snow fell soft and thick, people swore they could see two figures riding through the canyon pass, an old cowboy and his beloved wife, forever young in memory, forever together in the place where their story began. A love story born from blood and snow, nurtured through hardship and joy, and eternal in the hearts of all who heard their tale.